When night janitor Liam Burns screamed at billionaire Avaline Langford not to get into her car, he was risking everything: his freedom, his future, and his dying 7-year-old daughter's only chance at survival. The bubbles that had once calmed a frightened child would now become the fragile thread, connecting two desperate souls fighting to save the people they loved most. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The first time Liam Burns saw panic in a child's eyes, it was in his own daughter. Maya had been 4. Her small body rigid with fear as thunder crashed outside their apartment window. That night, he discovered the magic of soap bubbles, the way they transformed terror into wonder, how their fragile, iridescent beauty could momentarily eclipse even the most overwhelming fears. It had become their ritual in moments of crisis. A bottle of bubble solution always tucked in his pocket like a talisman. Today, the bottle was nestled in the breast pocket of his gray janitor's uniform as he mopped the gleaming marble floors of the Langford Industries lobby. The skyscraper was a monument to power and wealth, all sleek steel and cold glass, and Liam was part of the invisible army that kept it pristine. For 8 months, he had walked these halls after hours, emptying trash cans, polishing fixtures, and fading into the background of corporate ambition. Most days, he was a ghost, purposely unseen by executives and assistants alike, but today was different. The girl appeared suddenly, a small figure with copper hair and a blue dress, no more than 7 years old. She stood alone near the reception desk, her shoulders trembling. At first, Liam thought she was crying, but as he drew closer, he recognized the shallow, rapid breathing, the unfocused gaze. She was having a panic attack. Liam set his mop aside and approached slowly, keeping a respectful distance. "Hey there," he said gently. "My name's Liam. I work here. Are you okay?" The girl's eyes darted to him, then away, her breathing still ragged. She didn't couldn't answer. "You know what helps me sometimes when things feel scary?" he continued, crouching to her level. "Bubbles." He pulled the small bottle from his pocket and uncapped it, dipping the plastic wand. With a soft breath, he sent a stream of iridescent spheres dancing through the air between them. They caught the light, tiny rainbow worlds drifting on invisible currents. The girl's breathing hitched, then slowed. Her eyes tracked the bubbles, widening slightly. "Wanna try?" Liam offered the wand. After a moment's hesitation, she reached out. Her first attempt was too forceful, the bubbles bursting instantly. Liam demonstrated again, showing her how to blow gently. Her second try sent a perfect cluster floating upward, and the faintest ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I'm Eleanor," she whispered, her voice still wobbly but present. "Nice to meet you, Eleanor. Those are some excellent bubbles." Liam smiled. "Are you here with someone?" Eleanor nodded, her expression clouding again. "My mom. She's in a meeting," she said to wait by the desk, but then there were so many people and I couldn't breathe, and it got scary. Liam finished for her. "That happens to me too sometime. And my daughter, Maya, is about your age." Eleanor blew another stream of bubbles, her shoulders relaxing incrementally. "Does she get scared a lot?" "Sometimes. She gets scared of thunderstorms and doctors' offices, but she's also the bravest person I know." What Liam didn't say was that Maya's bravery wasn't a choice. The tremors had started 6 months ago, small, almost imperceptible shakings in her hands as she drew or tied her shoes. Then came the diagnosis: neurosynaptic decay syndrome, a rare neurological disorder that would progressively rob her of motor control, speech, and eventually, if untreated, her life. The doctors had been gentle, but unflinching. There were no approved treatments, and the prognosis was poor. Since then, Liam had lived in 2 worlds. The daylight hours spent making Maya's life as normal and joyful as possible, and the night hours drowning in medical journals, experimental treatment forums, and increasingly desperate prayers. Eleanor was blowing bubbles at the ceiling now, her panic attack subsiding. "My mom doesn't know I get scared," she confided. "She never gets scared of anything." Liam smiled. "All people get scared sometimes, even mom. Not my mom. She's..." Eleanor's eyes shifted to something behind Liam, widening with a mixture of relief and apprehension. He turned to find a woman standing a few yards away, watching them with an unreadable expression. Even if Eleanor hadn't reacted, Liam would have known immediately who she was. Avaline Langford's face was plastered across business magazines, news segments, and the company's own promotional materials. The CEO of Langford Industries was striking in person, tall and commanding in a tailored suit. Her dark hair swept into a precise knot at the nape of her neck. Her eyes, fixed now on her daughter, were the color of a winter storm. "Eleanor," she said, her voice cool and controlled. What are you doing?" "Blowing bubbles," Eleanor answered, suddenly timid. She handed the wand back to Liam, who quickly pocketed it. Avaline Langford's gaze shifted to him, taking in his uniform, the mop leaning against a nearby column, the bottle in his hand. "You're from maintenance?" "Yes, ma'am." "Liam Burns. Night shift." He stood, suddenly acutely aware of his worn shoes and the fading stain on his cuff. "Your daughter was a bit upset. I hope it's okay." "She was having a panic attack," Eleanor interrupted. "He helped me, like magic." A flicker of something, concern, embarrassment, perhaps both, crossed Avaline's face before she composed it again. "I see. Thank you, Mr. Burns." She extended her hand to Eleanor, who reluctantly moved to her side. "Eleanor, Dr. Chun rescheduled our meeting. We'll be leaving now. Single quotes. Eleanor nodded, her earlier calm fading beneath her mother's scrutiny. As they turned to leave, she looked back at Liam. "Thank you for the bubbles." "Anytime, Eleanor," he replied with a small wave. Avaline Langford paused, her expression softening fractionally. Yes, thank you, Mr. Byrne. Then to her daughter. Perhaps we should get our own bubbles for home, it was said lightly. An olive branch of sorts. But Eleanor's face lit up as if she'd been offered the moon. Liam watched them walk away, the powerful CEO and her anxious daughter, wondering about the complex world they inhabited together. Then he returned to his mop and his routine, thinking of Maya waiting at home with MRs, Henderson probably working on her latest drawing. He'd be back in 4 hours, bearing hot chocolate and a new bedtime story. He didn't know that Avaline Langford was watching him from the lobby security feed in her private elevator, her thoughts unreadable behind her composed expression. He didn't know that Eleanor was chattering excitedly about bubbles and bravery. He didn't know that this brief interaction had already set wheels in motion that would eventually collide with his carefully constructed world. All he knew was that night, as he emptied trash bins on the executive floor, he found something peculiar in the shredder bin outside the CEO's office. A fragment of paper that read, "Neurosynaptic decay syndrome, Langford Initiative," and below it, "Final testing phase, Langford." Liam stared at the shredded document, his heart suddenly pounding. K. Langford, Kellen Langford, Avaline's brother, whose mysterious illness had been mentioned in passing in business profiles of the CEO, and neurosynaptic decay syndrome, the same disease slowly killing his daughter. His hands trembled as he carefully pocketed the paper fragment. For the first time in 6 months, he felt something dangerous and fragile blooming in his chest: hope. 2 weeks later, Liam stood on the sidewalk outside Langford Industries, watching Avaline Langford approach her sleek black sedan. His uniform was sweat-soaked, his face pale, his entire future balanced on the knife edge of the next few moments. In his pocket was a meticulously reassembled document, pieces rescued from the shredder bin over 14 painstaking nights. A document that revealed both a miracle and a nightmare. The miracle, a potential cure for neurosynaptic decay syndrome developed in secret by Langford Industries. The nightmare, evidence that the cure was being deliberately sabotaged, its true efficacy hidden. Its test subject, Kellen Langford, unknowingly receiving a compound designed to accelerate rather than halt the disease's progression. Liam took a deep breath, thinking of Maya, of Eleanor, of the fragments of paper that had revealed a conspiracy he still couldn't fully comprehend. Then he stepped forward, his voice tearing through the crisp afternoon air with desperate intensity. "Ma'am, don't get in the car." The words tore through the crisp afternoon air, raw and desperate. Avaline Langford froze, one hand on the polished chrome handle of her sedan, her vision of the world momentarily fractured. The city's hum, the distant sirens, the murmur of traffic all fell away, leaving only that ragged, terrified voice. 2 men in dark suits, members of her security detail, moved as one. They converged on Liam, the janitor in the gray uniform, whose face was pale and slick with sweat. He had burst from a service exit, a ghost materializing from the building's steel and glass facade. "Stay back," one guard commanded, his voice a low growl. He placed himself between Avaline and Liam, his body a solid wall. The other guard grabbed Liam, spinning him and slamming him against the limestone wall. Liam's breath left him in a pained grunt, a set of keys clattering to the pavement. "Don't let her get in," Liam gasped, craning his neck to keep his eyes on Avaline. "Please." "You can't." Avaline's shock curdled into icy irritation. She was already 12 minutes behind schedule for a meeting that could not be rescheduled, a meeting whose secrecy was absolute. This interruption was unacceptable. "Graves," she said to her head of security, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "What is the meaning of this?" She pulled her hand back from the car door as if scorched. "Who is this man?" "Liam Byrne, ma'am," Graves replied, his eyes scanning the street, the surrounding rooftops, every parked car. His hand drifted to the inside of his jacket. "Night crew maintenance. He's clearly disturbed." "No." Liam's voice cracked. "Listen to me just for a second. The car, it's not safe." The word hung in the air. Safe. In Avaline Langford's world, it was processed through a dozen filters of risk assessment and corporate espionage. But shouted by a frantic janitor on a city sidewalk, it meant only one thing. Graves's eyes narrowed. He looked at the sleek black sedan, then back at Liam's terrified face. Protocol took over, cold and swift. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle now." His tone was no longer a suggestion. He gestured to the other guard. "Lock it down. Get the police. Get the bomb squad. Full perimeter." Avaline's jaw tightened. "A bomb? Graves, this is absurd. The man is clearly unwell." "Maybe, ma'am," Graves said, gently but firmly guiding her back toward the building's marble entrance. "But we don't get paid to take chances on maybe." Within minutes, the street was chaos. Police cruisers sealed off both ends of the block, their tires squealing as they formed a barricade. A crowd gathered, phones held high. Avaline stood in the lobby, watching through plate glass as her perfectly structured afternoon collapsed into smoking ruins. Her driver stood pale-faced behind a police line. Liam was on his knees on the sidewalk, hands cuffed behind his back, two officers standing over him. He wasn't struggling anymore. He just stared at the black sedan, which sat alone in the cordoned-off street like a tomb. He had stopped her. That was all that mattered. But as the first member of the bomb squad appeared in heavy protective gear, cold dread washed over him. He hadn't thought this far. He hadn't thought about anything beyond the single blinding imperative to stop that car door from closing. He thought of Maya. He could picture her perfectly, sitting by the window of their small apartment, her sketchbook open on her lap, the slight tremor in her hand as she drew, a subtle, cruel symptom of the disease stealing her from him cell by cell. He remembered the last doctor's visit, the hushed, pitying tone. The progression is faster than we anticipated, Mr. Byrne. We're running out of options. That was a lie. There was an option. Okay, a new one. A cure, they were calling it, a miracle out of Langford Industries. He'd seen the name on the shredded papers he'd painstakingly reconstructed, seen the name of the trial, the lead researcher, and the name of the primary test subject, and his blood had run cold. A low metallic groan snapped him back to the present. A bomb disposal robot was rolling toward the sedan, extending a mechanical arm, its camera eyes swiveling to examine the undercarriage. Avaline watched, arms crossed, a knot of fury tightening in her stomach. The meeting was at a private airfield. The flight would depart in less than an hour. She was supposed to be there to witness the culmination of 2 years of secret, off-the-books funding, the moment she would finally see her brother again. She looked over at the janitor. His head was bowed, shoulders slumped in defeat. He didn't look like a terrorist. He looked like a man drowning. An hour later, the verdict came. The car was clean. Every panel, every wire, every inch of the chassis had been swept. There was no bomb. There was no threat. There was nothing. The police tape came down. The crowds dispersed. The bomb squad packed up their gear. The only things left were the lingering echo of sirens and Avaline Langford's cold, unadulterated rage. The officers pulled Liam to his feet. "You're looking at a felony, pal," one said. "False report, inciting panic. The DA's gonna have a field day with you." They were about to lead him to a cruiser when Avaline stepped out of the lobby. Her heels clicked on the pavement with the sharp, deliberate rhythm of a ticking clock. Graves moved to her side. "Ma'am, we'll handle this." "No," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. She stopped directly in front of Liam, her gaze so intense it felt like a physical weight. The officers paused, waiting. She looked at this man, this nobody, this ghost from the night shift who had just cost her something immeasurably important. She didn't see a madman. She saw a terror that was too specific, too real, and she needed to know why. She dismissed the officers with a flick of her eyes. They stepped back but remained close. "You have 5 seconds, Avaline said, her voice barely a whisper but carrying the full force of her power. "You will tell me why you just destroyed my day, and if I don't believe you, I will personally see to it that I destroy the rest of your life." Liam's heart hammered against his ribs. Each beat a drumbeat of panic. Her eyes, the color of a winter storm, bored into him. This was it. The moment where his life either ended or took a turn so sharp he couldn't imagine the road ahead. He couldn't tell her everything. The shredded papers, the late-night research, the web of lies he'd barely begun to untangle. It would sound like the ravings of a madman. He needed one thing, one key to unlock the door of her fury and prove this wasn't random. His throat was sandpaper. Swallowed, the sound loud in the sudden silence. "Neurosynaptic decay syndrome," he breathed, the words clumsy and foreign in his mouth. For the first time since he'd met her gaze, Avaline Langford flinched. It was imperceptible to anyone else. A slight widening of her eyes, a fractional tightening of her lips. But to Liam, who had staked his entire world on this moment, it was like a canyon opening at his feet. He had hit the target. Her composure, a fortress built over a lifetime, resealed itself in an instant. But the crack had shown. She knew exactly what he was talking about. That clinical, obscure name was a secret she had buried under layers of corporate firewalls, non-disclosure agreements, and personal pain. To hear it spoken by a janitor on a city street was like having a ghost whisper in her ear. She turned to the police officers, her tone shifting back to command. "This is a corporate security matter now, an internal one. I will handle Mersha Byrne's debriefing. You can release him into the custody of my security chief." The officer frowned. "Ma'am, he committed a crime. We can't just—" "You can and you will," Avaline cut in, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Langford Industries will not be pressing charges. We will, however, provide the city with a generous donation to the Police Benevolent Fund to compensate for the resources expended this afternoon. Send the paperwork to my legal department." It wasn't a request. It was a transaction. The officer exchanged a look with his partner, then nodded. The cuffs were unlocked. Liam rubbed his wrists, the raw red marks a testament to how close he'd come to the edge. "Graves," Avaline said without looking at him. "Take him, Byrne to the 50th floor conference room. He is not to speak to anyone. He is not to wait with him until I arrive." "Yes, ma'am." Graves' hand rested lightly on Liam's elbow. The touch wasn't rough, but it was inescapable. As Graves led him back into the gleaming lobby, Liam felt a new kind of fear. He was no longer a citizen in the hands of the law. He was an asset, a problem, a piece of corporate intelligence in the hands of Avaline Langford. He didn't know which was worse. The 50th floor conference room was a glass box in the sky. Windows on 3 sides offered a god's eye view of the city, a sprawling map of lights and shadows. The table was a single massive slab of obsidian black marble polished to a mirror finish. Liam felt like a bug under a microscope. Graves stood by the door, silent and motionless as a statue. An hour passed, then another. Liam's mind raced. He thought of Maya alone in their apartment, probably watching cartoons. Blissfully unaware of the hurricane her father had walked into, he had to call her. He had to let her know he'd be late. Can I use my phone? He asked Graves. My daughter? No, Graves said flatly. The door finally opened. Avaline Langford swept in, her personal assistant trailing with a tablet. She dismissed the assistant with a nod. The door clicked shut, leaving the three of them in sterile silence. She didn't sit. She prowled the perimeter of the room, her heels silent on the plush carpet. Liam remained standing, feeling the grime of his uniform, the sweat on his brow, the chasm between their two worlds. Neurosynaptic decay syndrome, she began, her voice calm, controlled. It's exceptionally rare. Fewer than 2,000 diagnosed cases worldwide. She stopped her pacing and turned to face him fully. Tell me, Mr. Byrne, how a man who mops floors for a living became an expert in boutique neurology. Liam's hands trembled. He clasped them behind his back. My daughter, Maya. She was diagnosed 6 months ago. The words landed in the room and stayed there. Avaline's pacing halted. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the CEO assessing a threat, the woman hearing an echo of her own private hell. She's 7, Liam continued, his voice thick with emotion he could no longer suppress. She loves to draw. Her hands have started to shake. The doctors said it's progressing. They said there's nothing they can do. He saw a flicker of something in her expression. Not pity, but a shared, bleak understanding. He had to press on. I know about the trial, he said, his voice dropping. The one you're funding. The Langford Initiative. I know you think you found a cure. Avaline's face went blank, her expression unreadable. The source of your information is of great interest to me. I found things, papers. He couldn't admit he'd pieced them together from a shredder bin. Not yet. I saw the name of the lead subject in the final. Your brother, Kellen Langford. Her jaw tightened. You have been busy, Mr. Byrne. I was desperate, he shot back, a surge of courage rising with his fear. Wouldn't you be? A cure is being developed in the very building I work in. A cure for the thing that's killing my little girl. I had to know more. And what you know prompted you to cause a citywide panic and make me miss the most important meeting of my life? Yes. Liam took a step forward. Graves tensed by the door. Because it's not a cure. It's a lie. The treatment, it doesn't work. It makes it worse. I saw the preliminary data. The mortality rates they buried in the appendices. They're not saving your brother, Miss Langford. They're using him. Avaline stared at him, her mind racing, processing, analyzing. Was this an elaborate corporate sabotage attempt? Was he a pawn for a rival company? Or was he something far more dangerous? A desperate father who had stumbled upon a truth she herself had refused to see. She had poured $1 billion of her personal fortune into this project. She had trusted Dr. Finch. She had believed in the miracle because she had to. She walked to the head of the table and finally sat, gesturing for him to take a chair opposite her. The distance between them felt like miles. You say you have a daughter, she said, her tone shifting, becoming less of an interrogator and more of a strategist. I'm going to need her medical records, her full diagnostic history, everything. Liam's blood ran cold. Why? She has nothing to do with this. She has everything to do with this, Avaline corrected him, her eyes locking onto his. You've made an extraordinary claim, Mr. Byrne. A dangerous one. I need to know if the foundation of your story is built on rock or on sand. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a low, intense murmur. You are not leaving this building. My people will be looking into every aspect of your life, starting with your daughter. If you're telling me the truth, we have a mutual interest. But if you are lying, she paused, letting the weight of her words fill the room, then you have made an enemy you cannot possibly comprehend. The silence in the glass cage was absolute. Liam sat at the obsidian table, his reflection a tired, distorted stranger staring back at him. He was a prisoner, not in a jail cell with bars, but in a sky-high monument to a world he didn't belong in. His fate hanging on the whims of a woman who could erase him with a single phone call. Every minute that ticked by was a minute he wasn't with Maya. Was she home from school yet? Had Mrs. Henderson next door given her the afternoon snack he'd left? Did she notice he hadn't called? The thought was a physical pain sharper than the ache in his wrists. In her penthouse office 5 floors above, Avaline Langford moved with cold purpose. The janitor's desperate, ragged confession had bypassed her corporate defenses and struck something deeper, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Doubt. I want everything on Liam Byrne, she told Graves over the intercom, her voice devoid of emotion. Employment history, credit score, social media, known associates. I want to know what he eats for breakfast. And I want his daughter's medical file, not a summary, the entire chart. Have our legal team make the request directly to the pediatric neurology department at St. Jude's. Use my name. I want it in 1 hour. And Mr. Byrne? Graves's voice crackled back. He stays where he is. No calls. No contact. He is a black box. I need to know what's inside before I decide to open it. The machine of Langford Industries, once aimed at Liam, now focused on his life story. It was brutally efficient. Within 45 minutes, a series of encrypted files arrived on Avaline's tablet. She bypassed the financial data and went straight to the medical report. Patient, Maya Byrne, Age 7. Diagnosis: neurosynaptic decay syndrome, stage 2. Avaline's breath caught. She read through the neurologist's notes, the clinical language a stark, sterile description of a nightmare she knew all too well. Patient presents with increased distal tremors, observable decline in fine motor skills. Prognosis is aggressive. It was a mirror of the report she received weekly about her brother Kellen. The foundation of Liam Byrne's story wasn't sand. It was bedrock. He wasn't lying. The knowledge didn't bring relief, only a colder, more profound sense of dread. If he was telling the truth about his daughter, what if he was also telling the truth about the cure? Down on the 50th floor, Liam was pacing. The anxiety was a living thing inside him, clawing at his insides. He had to talk to Maya. He approached the door where Graves stood, an immovable object. "Please," Liam said, his voice cracking. "I need to call my daughter. She'll be worried. She's just a little girl. Just 2 minutes. You can listen to every word." Graves' expression was unreadable, but he tapped his earpiece. "Ma'am, Byrne is requesting a call to his daughter." The line was silent for a moment. Then Avaline's voice came through, clipped and precise. "Put it on speaker dots." Purdy's produced a phone and dialed the number Liam gave him. After 2 rings, Maya's small voice answered. "Daddy?" A wave of relief so powerful it made Liam dizzy washed over him. "Hey, sweet pea. It's me. Daddy, where are you? You didn't call after school." He closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against the cool glass of the window. The lie felt like acid on his tongue. "I know, baby. I'm so sorry. It's a crazy night at work. One of the big water pipes broke, and it's a huge mess. I have to work a double shift to help clean it up." "Oh no," she said, her voice small. "Will you be home for bedtime stories?" The simple question was a knife in his heart. "I'm going to try, Maya. I'm going to try really, really hard." "Did you have your snack?" "Yes. And I did my homework. I drew a picture of a castle for you. It has a big gate to keep the monsters out." Liam choked back a sob, turning it into a cough. "That sounds amazing, sweet pea. You keep that gate strong for me, okay?" "Okay, Daddy, I love you. I love you more, Maya. Be good for Miss Henderson. I'll call you as soon as I can." He hung up, his hand trembling. He slid down the wall to the floor, burying his face in his hands, the facade of strength crumbling into dust. He was unaware of the CEO 5 floors up, listening to the entire exchange, the sterile silence of her office filled with the sound of a father's breaking heart. Avaline switched off the intercom. The conversation had done what no financial report or background check could. It had made Liam Byrne real. He wasn't a corporate threat. He was a man fighting the same war she was, only with none of her resources. She turned to her secure terminal and pulled up the file on the Langford initiative. She scrolled past the glossy progress reports from Dr. Alistair Finch, past the fabricated projections of success. Her eyes scanned the financials, the endless lists of acquisitions for the research facility, chemicals, lab equipment, containment units, and a name she had approved months ago but never questioned. A consulting payment to a firm called Helios Analytic. A quick encrypted search brought up the company's file. It was a shell corporation, and its sole proprietor was a doctor, Corbin Vance, a biochemist who had lost his license 5 years earlier for falsifying clinical trial data. A fact doctor Finch had failed to mention. Her blood ran cold. She had been so blinded by hope, so desperate for a miracle that she had ignored the red flags, the little inconsistencies. Finch's resistance to a third-party audit, which he dismissed as unnecessary delays that Kellen can't afford. She looked at a photo on her desk, a younger version of herself and her brother, smiling on a sailboat, the sun in their hair before the diagnosis. Before the world had shrunk to hospital rooms and grim prognoses, the janitor was right. They weren't saving him. They were using him. Her finger hovered over the intercom button to call Graves. This required a different touch. She picked up her direct encrypted line to Dr. Finch's private office at the research facility. He answered on the first ring, his voice smooth as silk. "Avaline, I was beginning to worry. I trust the meeting was postponed," she said, her voice a chip of ice. She didn't give him time to respond. "Alistair, I'm reviewing the Q3 expenditure reports. A payment was flagged for a consultant, Helios Analytics. I wasn't aware we had an outside firm analyze. Can you clarify Dr. Corbin Vance's role in the trial?" The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. It lasted only 3 seconds, but in that space, Avaline heard everything. The frantic search for a lie, the shock of being caught, the cold, sharp clang of a trap springing shut. Finally, Finch's voice came back, strained and suddenly stripped of its easy charm. "Corbin Vance? That must be a clerical error. He has no formal role. He's an old colleague I occasionally consult for his historical perspective." "His historical perspective on falsifying data?" Avaline asked, letting the question hang in the air, cold and deadly. "Doctor," Finch sputtered on the other end of the line, a rush of indignant protests tumbling out. "Falsifying data? That man was a victim of academic politics." "I will not have my integrity questioned, Avaline. Not after everything I've done for your family. Your integrity is no longer a topic of discussion." "Alistair," Avaline said, her voice dropping to absolute zero. "It is now evidence. You will not touch the facility servers. You will not delete a single file. And if you go anywhere near my brother, I will bring the full weight of the federal government down on you so fast your head will spin. Am I clear?" She didn't wait for an answer. She ended the call, the silence in her office ringing with the finality of a death sentence. The board was set. The enemy was flushed from the shadows. Now she had to move faster than him. She took her private elevator down to the 50th floor. When she entered the glass-walled conference room, Liam was on his feet, pacing like a caged animal. He looked up as she entered, his face a mask of exhaustion and fear. The power dynamic between them had irrevocably shifted. He was no longer just a suspect, and she was no longer just his accuser. They were two people on opposite sides of a canyon, now staring at the same monster on the other side. "You were right," she said, the words costing her a piece of her pride. She slid her tablet across the polished marble table. On the screen was the file for Helios Analytics and the damning photo of Dr. Corbin Vance. Dr. Finch has been paying a disgraced researcher who was barred for faking trial results. He panicked when I confronted him just now. He lied. Liam stared at the screen, then back at her. The validation did little to ease the terror in his eyes. It only confirmed the depth of the danger they were in. "He's gonna move," Liam stated, his voice barely a whisper. "He's gonna accelerate his timeline." "Yes," Avaline affirmed, her own voice tight. "The meeting you forced me to miss today, it was to witness the final results and authorize the final transfer of funds. Once that money is in his account, he and his data are gone. And your brother ... single quotes, she couldn't finish the sentence. Liam thought of the shredded documents, the fragments of sentences he'd pieced together. A phrase he hadn't understood at the time suddenly clicked into place. Post-transfer asset liquidation. They weren't talking about stocks. They were talking about her brother. "He's going to kill him," Liam said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow, to bury the proof that the cure was a fraud. Avaline nodded, her jaw tight, "Which means we have hours, maybe less. I need to know everything you saw. Every word, every name. Don't leave anything out, no matter how small." For the first time, Liam felt a surge of agency. He wasn't powerless anymore. He was the only other person who knew a piece of the truth. "First, you have to promise me something," he said, finding his voice. Avaline raised an eyebrow. "My daughter," Liam said, his voice firm, unwavering. "If I help you, if we do this, you have to promise me you will protect her no matter what happens." Avaline studied his face, seeing the unshakable resolve of a father, a resolve she was just beginning to understand in herself. "Your daughter's safety is non-negotiable," she said, her tone softening for the first time. "If we expose this, I will personally fund her treatment with a legitimate medical team wherever in the world we have to go. You have my word." As a woman, not as a CEO, it was a vow. It was enough. Liam recounted every detail he could remember: offshore bank account numbers, chemical formulas that didn't match public patents, and the name of a transport company scheduled for a medical waste disposal pickup from the facility's back dock at 6:00 a.m. the next morning. "It's not waste," Avaline murmured, her face pale. "It's Kellen." She sprang into action, her mind a whirlwind of strategy. "Graves," she barked into her intercom, "get the jet ready for Black Ridge Airfield, and I need full schematics for the North Valley Research Facility architectural, security, and HVAC. Now." She turned back to Liam. "I can get a team of federal marshals there, but it will take a judge warrants. It could take 12 hours. We don't have 12 hours. Finch will be gone by then. We have to get in tonight." Graves entered with a tablet projecting the facility's intricate blueprints onto a screen that descended from the ceiling. It was a fortress, a single access road, electrified perimeter fencing, motion sensors. A full tactical assault would be a siege. "Ma'am," Graves said gravely, "it's impossible on this timeline." Liam stepped closer to the screen, his eyes scanning not the main structures but the spaces in between. His finger landed on a small, insignificant-looking icon on the far side of the compound. "What is that?" Avaline asked. "An industrial sanitation conduit," Liam answered, his voice gaining confidence, "for acidic chemical runoff from the main lab. It's shielded, reinforced, and it empties into a drainage culvert half a mile outside the perimeter fence." Graves frowned. "That conduit would be less than 30 inches wide, and it would be connected directly to their waste processing. It's a suicide run." "Not if their waste processing isn't active," Liam countered. "The documents I saw had a maintenance schedule. The primary filtration system is shut down for cleaning every night between 2 and 4 a.m. It wouldn't be running experiments then. To save on power, they'd put the lab in standby." Avaline stared at him, a flicker of awe in her eyes. He saw the building not as a fortress, but as a network of vulnerabilities. He saw it the way a janitor would. "You're saying we could get inside through a sewer pipe?" she said. "I'm saying," Liam corrected her gently, "that he'll be watching the front door for a CO. He'll never be watching the drains for a janitor." A heavy silence filled the room. The plan was insane. It was reckless. It was the only chance they had. Avaline looked from the schematic to Liam's determined face, then to Graves. "Get the gear," she commanded. "We're going in, and Mr. Byrne is coming with us." The jet ascended into the night, a silent ghost leaving the city's glittering grid behind. Liam sat stiffly in a cream-colored leather seat that cost more than his car, the janitor's uniform feeling like a costume in this world of polished wood and silent efficiency. Across from him, Avaline Langford had shed her CEO persona and was now a field commander, her face illuminated by the cold blue light of the schematics on her tablet. Graves sat beside her, methodically checking a set of compact high-tech gear. The silence on the plane was heavy, filled with the unspoken fear and desperate hope of their mission. Liam's world had been upended in less than 12 hours. He clutched the armrests and thought of Maya. He pictured her sitting by the window of their small apartment, her sketchbook open on her lap. He saw the slight tremor in her hand as she drew, a subtle, cruel symptom of the disease that was stealing her from him. He remembered the last doctor's visit, the hushed, pitying tone. "The progression is faster than we anticipated, Mr. Byrne. We're running out of option." That was a lie. There was an option, a cure. He had to believe that beneath Finch's deception, there was a kernel of truth, a genuine treatment that could save both Kellen and Maya. Avaline looked up, her gaze analytical but no longer hostile. "Tell me about her," she said, her voice quiet, cutting through the engine's hum. Liam blinked. "Who?" "Maya." Avaline clarified. "You're risking your life. Want to know why?" He swallowed, the lump in his throat feeling like a stone. She's she's bright," he began, his voice rough. "She's funny. She asks a million questions. Her favorite color is yellow, the color of the sun right when it wakes up. She wants to be an astronomer, says she wants to discover a new star and name it after her mom." He trailed off, the memory of his late wife a sudden sharp ache. Avaline didn't offer pity. She just listened. "My brother Kellen," she said, her voice dropping so low Liam had to strain to hear it. "He used to sail. He loved the ocean. He said it was the only place where you could feel how big the world was and how small your problems were. The last time we spoke, he told me he just wanted to feel the sun on his face one more time without feeling like he was fading away. In that moment, they weren't a CEO and a janitor. They were just two people bound by the same cruel disease, sharing stories of the people they were trying to save. An hour later, the luxury of the jet was a distant memory, replaced by the damp chill of a forest floor. They moved in tactical silence, the only sound the crunch of their boots on fallen leaves. Then they saw it, a high chain-link fence topped with razor wire, and beyond it, the North Valley Research Facility, a low, dark shape against the starry sky. Liam led them along the perimeter to the spot from the schematic. The drainage culvert was a concrete tube half hidden by overgrown weeds, the air thick with a chemical tong. Graves produced heavy bolt cutters and snipped through a rusted iron grate. "It's 2:15 a.m., he whispered, handing out night vision goggles. "The filtration system should be offline for another hour and 45 minutes. If we're not out by then, this pipe will flood with corrosive chemicals. We go in, we find the brother, and we get out. No deviations." The crawl was a claustrophobic nightmare. Liam followed Graves into the pipe, the space shockingly tight. They moved on hands and knees through a slick of cold, foul-smelling residue, the world reduced to the eerie green glow of their goggles and their own ragged, echoing breaths. The pipe was a perfect amplifier, turning every scrape of a knee and gasp for air into a deafening noise. It felt like being buried alive, a slow, miserable journey through the building's foul intestines. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Graves stopped. "We're here," he breathed into the cums. Ahead, a vertical steel grill blocked their path. Beyond it, Liam could make out the shapes of pipes and machinery in a cavernous subbasement. They had made it inside. A surge of adrenaline shot through him. Graves readied a small hydraulic tool to pry the grill open, but he paused, holding up a hand for silence. He peered through the bars, his body going rigid. He slowly lowered the tool. "What is it?" Avaline whispered into her cum. "What's wrong?" Graves backed away from the grill, his movements slow and deliberate. He looked back at them, his eyes wide in the green glow of the goggles. "We have a problem," he breathed, his voice tight with alarm. "The lab isn't on standby. There are two men down here. They're armed." The whisper echoed in the tight metallic space, sharp as a shard of glass. Armed, Liam's blood went cold. This wasn't part of the plan. The entire mission was predicated on a sleeping building, a skeleton crew. Instead, they'd crawled directly into a hornet's nest. Through the grill, he could see them. Two men, not in security uniforms, but in dark, functional gear. They wore boots that made no sound on the concrete floor and carried compact submachine guns with practiced ease. They weren't guards, they were soldiers. And they were moving with a predatory stillness, their eyes scanning the shadows as they loaded large, sealed biohazard containers onto a heavy-duty pallet near a freight elevator. "They're not patrolling," Graves breathed back. "They're staging, loading out." Liam's eyes locked onto the white containers, his heart seized. He remembered the line item from the shredded documents: transport and disposal contract, bio-waste class 7. The pickup wasn't scheduled for 6 a.m., it was happening now. "That's it," Liam whispered, his voice tight with dawning horror. "That's the transport." Finch moved up the timeline. "As soon as you called, he initiated the protocol." "Asset liquidation," Avaline hissed, the corporate euphemism tasting like ash in her mouth. They were no longer breaking in to find proof. They were trying to stop a murder in progress. The ticking clock wasn't the 4 a.m. sanitation flush anymore. It was the closing doors of that freight elevator. "We can't get through here," Graves stated, the finality in his tone chilling. "They have a clear line of sight. We'd be cut down before we took 2 steps. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at Liam's mind. They were trapped. He squeezed his eyes shut, forcing himself to see the blueprints he had studied for hours. He wasn't a soldier. He was a janitor. He saw what they didn't. "The shaft," he breathed, his voice urgent. "The lab supplied dumbwaiter. On the schematics, it was 20 yards to the left of our position, on the north wall. It runs vertically through the whole facility. It's across open floor," Graves countered. "Create a diversion," Avaline commanded, her mind already calculating. "Something loud." Graves calibrated a small electromagnetic device. "I can overload the junction box for the lighting grid in the east corridor. It'll be a flash and a bang. It should draw them both. You'll have one shot." Be ready. He aimed the device through the grill. On my mark. 3.2.1. Mark. A brilliant blue-white flash lit up the far end of the basement, followed an instant later by a percussive crack and the sound of shattering glass. The two armed men spun around, weapons raised, shouting to each other as the corridor was plunged into darkness, alarms beginning to blare. Go! Go now, Graves yelled, kicking the grill open with a single powerful stomp. They scrambled out, a chaotic tumble of limbs onto the cold concrete. For a moment, Liam was frozen by the sheer exposure of the open space. Then Avaline grabbed his arm, pulling him forward. Liam, move. They ran, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The 20 yards to the north wall felt like a mile. Liam's lungs burned. He could hear the men shouting behind them. He slammed into the wall, hands slapping against the cool steel, searching for the dumbwaiter door. He found the recessed handle and pulled. Locked. A beam of light from one of the men's weapon mounted. Flashlights sliced through the darkness, sweeping across the floor toward them. Graves was there in a second, jamming a pry bar into the seam. With a screech of protesting metal, the door popped open. He shoved Liam and Avaline inside the cramped, greasy-smelling box. Get going, he ordered, squeezing in behind them and pulling the door shut just as the flashlight beam hit the wall where they had been. Plunged into absolute darkness, Liam fumbled for the control panel and slammed the up button. With a violent lurch, the dumbwaiter began its slow, grinding ascent, the chain mechanism screaming out their location. Medical wing is on the 3rd floor, Liam whispered. We're almost there. The dumbwaiter shuddered to a halt. Through the thin metal door, they could hear the squeak of rubber wheels on a polished floor and a low, urgent murmur. Graves slowly, carefully pulled the door open a fraction of an inch. Through the crack, Liam saw a brightly lit, sterile white hallway. Moving down it away from them was a gurney pushed by 2 orderlies in surgical scrub. A still figure lay on it, completely covered by a white sheet. Dr. Finch walked beside it, looking at his watch. Avaline saw it too. A choked, strangled sound escaped her lips. A single, horrified word that was both a question and a prayer. Kellen? Avaline lunged for the door handle, a raw, guttural cry building in her throat. Graves caught her, his hand clamping down on her shoulder like a vice, pulling her back into the shadows of the dumbwaiter. No, ma'am, wait, he hissed, his voice ablaze in the darkness. We're exposed. They'll kill us all. That's my brother, she choked out, fighting against his grip. Her eyes locked on the gurney as it neared the freight elevator at the end of the hall. Liam watched, his own heart in his throat. As Dr. Finch pressed the call button, the massive steel doors slid open. The 2 orderlies pushed the gurney inside. Finch glanced one last time down the empty corridor, a thin, satisfied smile on his face, before stepping in after it. The door slid shut with a heavy, final thud. It was over. They were too late. A strangled sob escaped Avaline. She slumped against the wall of the dumbwaiter, the fight draining out of her. All of this, the risk, the fear, the desperate crawl through the filth for nothing. No, Liam said, the word quiet but firm. Avaline and Graves both turned to him. In the dim light filtering through the crack in the door, they could see his eyes were narrowed, his brow furrowed in thought. What do you mean, no? Graves demanded. It's a decoy, Liam said, the pieces clicking together in his mind. It has to be. He was spooked after your call. I'd expect you might try something. Why move your most valuable asset through the main monitored hallway? Why the sheet? Why not a secured body bag if it's supposed to be waste? He's creating a ghost signal, a false trail on the security logs for anyone who comes looking later. Avaline looked up, a flicker of desperate hope igniting in her eyes. She clung to the logic, to the possibility. He wants it to look like my brother left through that elevator, but he's not in there, he's still here. Somewhere else, Aristotle, galvanized by the new possibility, she pulled out her tablet, its screen bathing the small space in a bright glow. She pulled up the 3rd floor schematic. He'd need a place that's secure, isolated, and off the main camera grid. Somewhere with a different way out. Her finger traced over the neat boxes of labs and patient rooms. Liam leaned closer. Not a new room, an old one somewhere forgotten. His finger landed on a large grayed-out section at the far end of the wing, labeled in small, archaic text, Surgical Theater 3, decommissioned. There, he said. It's an old wing. They wouldn't have bothered upgrading the security system. It probably has its own service elevator, an old one that goes straight to a basement loading dock. Avaline zoomed in. He was right. A thin line on the schematic indicated a small, isolated elevator shaft disconnected from the main building network. A ghost exit, she whispered. Just then, the freight elevator at the end of the hall chimed, its doors opening again. Finch and the 2 orderlies stepped out without the gurney. They headed back down the hallway, their job done. Now, Graves said, his voice low. Now we move. They slipped out of the dumbwaiter into the sterile white corridor. The air hummed with the quiet thrum of machinery and smelled of antiseptic. Every sound was magnified. They moved like shadows, pressing themselves into a dark alcove as Finch and his team passed the other end of the hall. Liam watched the doctor's calm, purposeful stride and felt a chill. This was a man without a conscience. They reached the corridor leading to the decommissioned wing. It was darker here, the lights spaced farther apart. At the end of it was a set of heavy double doors made of steel, with a small wired glass window showing only darkness beyond. Next to it was an electronic keypad, its single red light glowing like a malevolent eye. Graves examined the lock. Magnetic seal, encrypted keypad. I can't bypass this without a plasma cutter, or a lot more time than we have. They were stuck. A few feet of steel and a password separated them from Kellen. Avaline pressed her ear to the cold metal of the door. She could hear a faint rhythmic beeping from inside. A heart monitor. He was in there. He was alive. Liam's eyes scanned the wall around the door, his gaze catching on a small, dusty metal plate near the floor. The lettering was faded, but he could just make it out. Emergency atmospheric purge control. He'd seen panels like it in old industrial buildings. It was a relic. Can't open the door, he said, a new daring idea forming in his mind. But I think I can make them open it for us. He pointed to the panel. This is a manual override for the room's ventilation. In old surgical theaters, if there was a chemical spill or a gas leak, you could trigger a purge. It would suck all the air out of the room and vent it outside, replacing it with a sterile saline nitrogen mix. The people inside would have about 30 seconds to get out before they suffocated. Graves stared at him, look of horrified admiration spreading across his face. Avaline's expression turned to ice. Finch is a monster, she said, her voice a low, vicious growl. Let's see how he likes it when his own lab tries to kill him. The old screws groaned in protest. Their threads rusted and stiff. Liam's fingers, slick with sweat, fumbled with the multi-tool. Every turn felt agonizingly slow, amplified by the steady, fragile beep-beep-beep of the heart monitor coming from the other side of the door. It was the sound of a life hanging in the balance, a life they were about to gamble in a desperate, reckless play. The last screw came free. Liam pulled the dusty panel off, revealing a simple, brutal mechanism inside. A heavy, insulated red lever set in the OFF position. Below it, a faded decal read, "Caution. Activation will result in total atmospheric expulsion." This was it, the point of no return. Liam looked up at Avaline. Her face was pale in the dim corridor light, but her eyes were burning with a cold fire. She gave a single, sharp nod. Liam gripped the lever with both hands, his muscles straining, and pulled. There was a heavy, satisfying clunk as the lever locked into the on position. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then a deep, powerful hum began to vibrate through the floor. The sound of immense turbines spinning to life somewhere in the bowels of the building. A single strobing red light above the steel door began to flash, painting the corridor in silent, rhythmic bursts of crimson. From inside the room, the placid beeping of the heart monitor instantly became a frantic, high-pitched shriek. A muffled shout of alarm and disbelief followed. Then the sound of crashing equipment. The keypad on the wall next to the door lit up, beeping furiously as someone inside tried to override the purge. Code after code was rejected. With a sudden sharp hiss of escaping air, the magnetic lock on the door disengaged. The heavy steel door was flung open from within, and Dr. Finch stumbled out into the hallway, clawing at his collar, his face a mask of purple-tinged panic. Right behind him was another man, older, with thinning gray hair and the terrified eyes of a rat trapped in a flooding sewer. Dr. Corbin Vance. They gasped in the hallway air, their lungs burning. Then they saw who was waiting for them. Finch's panic instantly morphed into incandescent rage. "You!" he spat at Avaline, his voice a ragged gasp. Before he could take another step, Graves moved forward, a shadow detaching from the wall. The sound of his suppressed pistol being drawn was a soft, deadly slick. "On your knees," Graves commanded, his voice a low, flat line of authority. "Hands on your head, now." Vance crumpled instantly, whimpering as he dropped to the floor. Finch hesitated, his eyes blazing with hatred, but the cold, unwavering barrel of the gun aimed at his chest made the decision for him. He slowly, shakily knelt beside his partner. Avaline didn't even glance at them. She pushed past, her entire world narrowing to the open doorway. She stepped into the decommissioned surgical theater. The room was a sterile nightmare of stainless steel and dark glass, the air thin and vibrating with the thrum of the purge system. In the center of the room, on an operating bed, lay her brother. Kellen was terrifyingly still, his skin the color of old parchment. A web of tubes and wires connected him to a bank of monitors that screamed with alarms. Avaline rushed to his side, her hand hovering over his, afraid to touch him, to break him. "Kellen," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm here." Behind her in the hallway, Finch began to laugh, a high, unhinged sound. "You're too late," he screeched, his voice echoing. "You have no idea what you've just interrupted. That final protocol was delicate. You've killed him." Avaline ignored the ranting. She stared at the machine, at the 4 bags dripping fluids into her brother's vein. The heart monitor's alarm was deafening. He was crashing. The purge, the shock to his system, it was too much. Liam stepped into the room behind her. He wasn't a doctor. He didn't understand the complex machinery, but he was a janitor. He understood systems. He saw order, and more importantly, he saw what was out of place. His eyes scanned the array of 4 lines. Most were standard clear bags with printed pharmaceutical labels, but one was different. It was a smaller, unlabeled bag of dark, amber-colored fluid, its tube a different gauge from the others, connected not to the main 4 stand, but tucked away, almost hidden beneath the gurney. It looked like an afterthought, a secret. "That one," Liam said, his voice cutting through the noise. He pointed. "Miss Langford, that bag. It doesn't belong." Avaline's eyes followed his finger. She saw it. Without a second's hesitation, she reached down and ripped the needle from the port in her brother's arm, tearing the tube free. The amber liquid dripped onto the white linoleum floor like poison. For a moment, the frantic shrieking of the heart monitor continued. Then, miraculously, the rhythm began to slow. The sharp, panicked peaks and valleys on the screen began to soften, settling into a steadier, weaker, but distinctly regular beat. Beep, beep, dot, 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 beep. Avaline stared, her hand pressed to her mouth as tears streamed down her face. Liam had just saved her brother's life. The shared moment of relief was shattered by a new sound, the thud of heavy boots running down the main corridor. Shouts. The armed cleaners from the basement, alerted by the alarms, were coming. Graves glanced from his two prisoners to the open doorway, then back to Avaline. His face was a grim mask. "They're here," he said, "and they're not gonna knock." The heavy steel door shuddered as something slammed into it from the outside. Then again, a coordinated rhythmic boom that echoed the frantic beating of Liam's own heart. "Barricade," Graves commanded, shoving Finch and Vance toward the far wall. "Now!" While Graves zip-tied the prisoners' hands with brutal efficiency, Liam and Avaline threw their weight against a heavy-wheeled bank of defunct medical monitors, rolling it in front of the door. The ancient casters screamed in protest. The door buckled again, a small dent appearing in the steel. "It wouldn't hold for long. They'll breach it in 2 minutes. Maybe less," Graves said, his voice grim. He checked his weapon, the slide clicking home with deadly precision. "We need another way out." "The service elevator," Avaline said, her eyes already scanning the room, remembering the ghost exit from the blueprints. "There," Liam pointed to the back of the theater behind the main observation gallery. A wall of obsolete stainless steel autoclaves and sterilizing units stood like silent sentinels. "It has to be back there." Another thunderous crash against the door sent a spiderweb of cracks through the small wired glass window. They could hear muffled shouts, orders being given in the hallway. "Avaline, get your brother," Graves ordered. "Liam, with me, we clear a path." The next 90 seconds were a blur of frantic, desperate action. Avaline disconnected the essential monitors, her hands surprisingly steady as she transferred Kellen's foredrip and the portable heart monitor to the gurney itself. Her brother remained unconscious, oblivious to the chaos erupting around him. Liam and Graves shoved the heavy autoclaves aside, muscles straining, the screech of metal on linoleum grating in the enclosed space. Behind the last unit they found it, a narrow, unmarked metal door flush with the wall. There was no keypad, only a simple heavy-duty latch and a small, grimy panel next to it labeled "Maintenance Override." "They're using a battering ram," Graves grunted, glancing back at the main door, which was now visibly bowing inward. 15 seconds. Avaline wheeled the gurney over, its wheels catching on the uneven floor. "Liam, the elevator. Can you get it working?" Liam pried the override panel open. Inside was a mess of old, thick wires and a large, rusted manual lever. It was a power disconnect. "It's completely offline," he said, his heart sinking. Boom. A hinge on the main door snapped with a percussive crack, the door slumping inward. "No time for a rewire," Graves yelled. He aimed his pistol at the lock on the service elevator and fired twice. The shots were deafening in the enclosed room. The lock shattered. He kicked the door open, revealing a dark, greasy elevator shaft. The car was right there, level with their floor. "Manual crank," he said, pointing to a large spoked wheel on the wall inside the shaft. "It's our only shot." Just as he spoke, the main door burst open with a scream of tortured metal. Two men in black tactical gear stormed in, their weapons sweeping the room. Graves opened fire, a controlled 3-round burst that dropped the first man. The second dove for cover, returning fire, the air filling with a deafening roar of automatic weapons and the sharp smell of cordite. "Get him in the elevator." Graves roared over the gunfire, laying down suppressing fire. "Go now." Liam and Avaline pushed the gurney into the small, dark elevator car. It barely fit. Vance and Finch, the two prisoners, huddled in the back corner, whimpering in terror. "Graves, come on!" Avaline screamed, her hand outstretched. More armed men were pouring into the room. Graves was backed into a corner, exchanging fire. A single man holding back an army. A bullet sparked off the metal wall near his head. He glanced back at the elevator, his face grim, a silent apology in his eyes. "There's no time," he shouted. "Get him out of here, ma'am. That's an order." "No," Avaline cried, her voice raw. "I'm not leaving you." Another volley of bullets ripped through the room, chewing up the wall where they stood. Liam saw the look on Graves' face. It wasn't a choice. It was a sacrifice for Kellen, for Avaline. Acting on pure instinct, Liam slammed his hand against the elevator's control panel. He found a large, greasy button under a cracked plastic cover that read, "Emergency Descent." He mashed it with the heel of his hand. A loud alarm bell began to clang, and with a sickening lurch, the elevator car dropped. The heavy grill-like doors began to slide shut. Avaline screamed Graves' name, her hand still reaching for him. The last thing they saw before the doors closed was Graves standing his ground, his gun blazing as the armed cleaners advanced on him, their forms silhouetted by the flashing red emergency light. Then the door slammed shut, plunging them into a rattling, clanging darkness. The sound of the gunfight abruptly cut off, replaced by the terrifying sound of their free-fall descent into the heart of the building. The elevator didn't just descend, it plummeted. The emergency brake was shot and the car dropped down the shaft in a terrifying semi-controlled freefall. The clang and screech of metal on metal was deafening. Sparks rained down from the cables above, illuminating the small, cramped space in strobing, hellish flashes. Avaline was thrown against the wall, her grief for Graves momentarily eclipsed by raw, primal terror. Liam grabbed onto a maintenance railing, his other arm thrown out protectively in front of Kellen's gurney. Finch and Vance were a heap on the floor, screaming. The fall lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. It ended with a bone-jarring, tooth-rattling crash as the car hit the bottom of the shaft. The impact so violent it threw them all to the floor. The world went dark. For a moment, there was only the sound of pained groans and ragged breathing. Then Liam's voice cut through the black. "Everyone okay?" "I'm fine," Avaline managed, her voice shaky. She fumbled for the tactical flashlight Graves had given her. A powerful white beam cut through the darkness, revealing the chaotic scene. The gurney had tipped, but Kellen was still strapped in. His monitors were dark. "Kellen!" Avaline scrambled to his side, her hand searching for a pulse in the dim light. "The power's out," Liam said, his mind already working. He found the monitor's battery backup switch and flipped it. The screen flickered to life. The steady, reassuring beat of Kellen's heart filled the silence. He was stable. Avaline let out a shuddering breath of relief. She looked at Liam, her eyes full of a dawning, terrifying respect. He wasn't just a janitor, he was a survivor. The elevator doors were crumpled and jammed, but Liam found a manual release lever. With a grunt of effort, he forced them open a few feet, enough to squeeze through. They were in a cavernous subterranean loading dock. The air was cool and smelled of diesel and damp concrete. A single bare bulb cast long, dancing shadows. This was Liam's world. "There," he said, pointing to a large, rolling steel door. "That's the main exit. But it'll be locked down. We need another way." His eyes scanned the loading bay, past the parked delivery trucks and stacks of crates. "Plan B," he said, his gaze landing on one of the trucks. As they began to carefully maneuver the gurney out of the wrecked elevator car, Finch staggered to his feet. "Wait," he said, his voice a desperate, sycophantic whine. He directed his words to Liam, ignoring Avaline completely. "You don't have to do this. You're not like her. I can pay you millions, and your daughter, the cure." It wasn't a complete lie. The data was just ... accelerated. "I can fix it. I can save her. Just let me go. Let me walk out that door and I will personally oversee her treatment." Liam stopped. He turned to face the man who had been seconds away from murdering his savior's brother. He thought of Maya, of her sweet, trusting face, and he thought of the amber-colored poison he'd seen dripping into Kellen's veins. "You don't get to say her name," Liam said, his voice low and cold as the concrete floor. "You don't get to talk about saving anyone. You are a monster, and you're going to prison for the rest of your life." He turned his back on Finch. The conversation was over. Avaline watched the exchange, her expression unreadable. She had offered Liam a promise. Finch had offered him a bribe. And the janitor, who had every reason in the world to be selfish, had chosen justice. Liam smashed the smaller passenger side window of the nearest truck with a fire extinguisher. He reached in, unlocked the door, and slid into the driver's seat. A few seconds later, the engine roared to life. "Get him in the back," he yelled over the noise. Avaline and a terrified doctor. Vance loaded the gurney into the truck's cargo bay. Avaline climbed in beside her brother. Liam slammed the truck into gear and stomped on the accelerator. The heavy vehicle lurched forward, smashing through the rolling steel door with a deafening crash of tearing metal. Alarms blared to life across the compound as they burst out into the pre-dawn chill. A mile down the dark, empty road, he pulled over. Avaline emerged, her face streaked with grime. She took out her satellite phone and dialed a number from memory. "Director Evans, this is Avaline Langford," she said, her voice ringing with absolute authority. "I am declaring a clear and present threat at the North Valley Research Facility. I have direct evidence of illegal human experimentation, conspiracy to commit murder, and massive financial fraud. The men responsible are armed and extremely dangerous. I need a federal tactical team on site now. Full quarantine and containment protocol." "My authority," she ended the call. Soon they heard it, a distant rhythmic chopping sound growing steadily louder. On the horizon, a swarm of black unmarked helicopters descended upon the facility like avenging angels. The cavalry had arrived. Avaline climbed into the passenger seat, her body slumping with exhaustion, her gaze fixed on the flashing lights in the distance. The immediate threat was over, but the cost was settling in. She turned to Liam, her voice quiet and heavy with a grief that was just beginning to surface. "He didn't make it, did he?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Graves?" Liam stared at the road ahead, at the path leading them away from the chaos and back toward a world that would never look the same. He had no answer to give her. There was only silence. The world outside the truck was a blur of flashing lights and screaming sirens. Liam drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his mind a numb void. Avaline sat in silence, her gaze fixed on the road, but seeing only the image of Graves framed by the closing elevator doors, a lone soldier against an unstoppable tide. They met the first federal blockade a mile down the road. Within minutes, the chaotic escape transformed into a controlled clinical operation. Medics swarmed the truck, carefully transferring a stable but still unconscious Kellen to a waiting life flight helicopter. FBI agents took a sputtering, protesting Dr. Finch and a catatonic Dr. Vance into custody. A brisk professional agent tried to question Avaline, but she cut him off. "I will give my full statement in 1 hour," she said, her voice like steel. "My priority right now is my brother." She looked at Liam. And him, he stays with me. The first days were a blur of hospital corridors, guarded debriefing rooms, and the constant quiet hum of medical machinery. The raid on the North Valley facility had been brutally efficient. Finch's entire operation was dismantled, his network of corrupt researchers and hired guns apprehended in a single decisive stroke. The full monstrous truth of his fraud was laid bare for the world to see. Avaline sat in a private waiting room, her gaze fixed on the city beyond the window, when Director Evans of the FBI entered. "He's a hero, Miss Langford," he said without preamble. "My men breached the surgical theater and found him surrounded by 4 unconscious assailants. He was out of ammunition, but he was still standing. He's in critical condition, but the doctors say he's gonna make." Avaline closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on her cheek. Graves. He had survived. That news became the foundation of their new reality. While Kellen began the long, slow journey of recovery, his body purged of Finch's poisons, Avaline waged a different kind of war. She fulfilled her promise to Liam. She took the real, untainted data from Finch's research and established the Langford Burn Foundation, a multi-billion-dollar initiative to find a legitimate cure, bringing together the world's best and brightest neurologists. Their first 2 patients were Kellen Langford and Maya Byrne. 3 weeks after the raid, Liam sat in a hospital room that was larger than his entire apartment, watching his daughter sleep. The tremors in her hands had stabilized, not cured, but no longer worsening. It was a start, a real one. The door opened quietly and Avaline entered. She looked different now, still elegant and composed, but the ice had melted from her eye. She wore a simple blouse and slacks instead of her usual power suit, and her hair fell loose around her shoulders. "How is she?" she asked, her voice soft. "The doctors say the new protocol is showing promise," Liam replied, not taking his eyes off Maya. "They've reversed some of the neural degradation in the lab samples. It's more than we had before." Avaline nodded, coming to stand beside him. "Kellen opened his eyes yesterday," she said, "just for a moment, but he knew me." Liam looked up at her then, a genuine smile breaking across his tired face. "That's wonderful." She sat in the chair next to him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. In the 3 weeks since the raid, they had spent countless hours together in meetings with medical teams, in debriefings with federal investigators, in the quiet hospital corridors between Kellen and Maya's room. The barriers of class and position had crumbled in the face of their shared purpose. "The FBI has built an airtight case against Finch and Vance," she said after a while. "They found evidence of 6 other trials where they falsified data. They were selling hope at a premium to desperate people. The prosecutor believes they'll both die in prison." "Good," Liam said simply. Then after a pause, "I keep thinking about that night, about the bubbles." Avaline looked confused. "Bubbles? In the lobby? With Eleanor?" "Your daughter," he smiled faintly. "If I hadn't been there that day, if I hadn't seen you, recognized you later in the security feed, I might never have connected the dots. Maya might never have had this chance. Eleanor still talks about you, you know," Avaline said, a soft warmth in her voice. "She calls you the bubble man. She insists on bringing a bottle with her everywhere now. Her therapist says it's been a breakthrough for her anxiety." Liam laughed, a quiet, genuine sound. "I'm glad. She's a sweet kid." A comfortable silence fell between them. Outside, the city was bathed in afternoon sunlight, the skyline a jagged silhouette against a clear blue sky. So much had changed in such a short time. "I've been thinking," Avaline said finally, "about what comes next. The foundation needs a director of patient advocacy, someone who understands what families are going through, someone who can see the things others miss." Liam looked at her surprised. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a purpose," she corrected gently. "You saved my brother's life. You saw what everyone else missed, the hidden 4, the inconsistencies in the data, the forgotten dumbwaiter. You did it all while carrying the weight of your daughter's illness. Imagine what you could do without that burden." Liam glanced back at Maya, his throat tight with emotion. "I don't have the credentials. If you say just a janitor, I might have to fire you before I even hire you," Avaline cut in, her voice firm but kind. "You're the man who brought down a medical conspiracy that fooled some of the brightest minds in the industry. You're the man who risked everything to save a stranger because it was the right thing to do. Don't tell me what you're not, tell me what you'll become." Before he could answer, a soft voice interrupted from the bed. "Daddy?" Maya was awake, her eyes bright and clear for the first time in months. Liam was at her side in an instant, taking her small hand in his. "Hey, sweet pea, how are you feeling?" "Better," she said, her voice still drowsy from sleep. "My head doesn't hurt so much anymore." Her gaze shifted to Avaline, curious. "Who's that?" Avaline stepped forward, a gentle smile transforming her face. "I'm Avaline. Your dad and I are friends." Maya studied her with the frank assessment only children can manage. "You're pretty. Are you a doctor?" "No." Avaline laughed softly. "I'm just someone your dad helped, and now I'm trying to help you both." Maya nodded, accepting this with the simple logic of childhood. "Did you know my dad can make magic bubbles? They make scary things not so scary." "I've heard that," Avaline said, her eyes meeting Liam's over Maya's head. "He helped my daughter with those same bubbles." "You have a daughter?" Maya's interest was piqued. "How old is she?" "She's 7, just like you. Her name is Eleanor. Can I meet her?" Maya asked, asked, her face brightening with the prospect of a new friend. Liam and Avaline exchanged a look, a silent communication that passed between them with surprising ease. "I think that could be arranged," Avaline said, "when you're feeling stronger." 2 days later, Graves was released from the ICU. He was moved to a private room in the same secure wing as Kellen and Maya. Avaline stood in the doorway, watching as the stoic security chief adjusted to his new temporary quarters. "You disobeyed a direct order," she said, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. Graves looked up, his face still bruised, but his eyes alert. "Yes, ma'am, I did. You risked your life. That's the job, ma'am." Avaline crossed the room and, to Graves' evident shock, hugged him gently, mindful of his injuries. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Single quotes. When she pulled back, Graves' expression had softened into something close to a smile. "The janitor," he said. "He's a good man." "Yes," Avaline agreed. "He is." Later that evening, Liam stood on the hospital's rooftop garden, a space normally reserved for the families of VIP patients. The city stretched out before him, a sea of lights in the gathering dusk. He heard the door open behind him but didn't turn. Avaline stepped up beside him, handed him a cup of coffee, and leaned against the railing. "The preliminary results came back from the new treatment protocol," she said. "Dr. Chun thinks we might see actual reversal of symptoms within 6 months." Liam's hands tightened around the cup. "Really?" "Really," she confirmed. "It's not just halting the progression anymore. It's healing the damage." She paused, watching his face. "I've been thinking about what you said, about why all of this happened, about bubbles and chance meetings. And I don't think it was chance," she said quietly. "I think sometimes the universe puts exactly the right people in exactly the right place. A janitor who sees what others miss. A CEO who can move mountains but couldn't see what was right in front of her." She turned to face him fully. "We're gonna beat this, Liam. For Kellen, for Maya, for all of them." Single quotes. For the first time since Maya's diagnosis, Liam felt something solid and real take root inside him. Not just hope, but certainty. 6 months later, the first real sun of spring was spilling through the branches of a giant oak tree, dappling the lawn in shifting patterns of gold. From the porch of a comfortable, quiet house nestled in a neighborhood far from the noise of the city, Liam watched his daughter chase a soccer ball across the grass. Maya ran. She didn't stumble. Her laughter was bright and effortless, and when she kicked the ball, her movements were sure and steady. Her hands, the hands that used to tremble when she held a crayon, were now strong enough to catch a ball thrown a little too hard by her new best friend. Kellen Langford, leaning against the porch rail, laughed as the ball bounced off his chest. He still walked with a cane, a faint reminder of the storm he had weathered, but his eyes were clear and full of life. "Watch it, superstar," he teased Maya. "You're gonna put me back in the hospital." "Nah," she giggled, running to retrieve the ball. "You're too strong for that now." Liam smiled. A deep, genuine smile that reached his eyes. The experimental gene therapy developed by the Foundation had worked. It had not just halted the disease, it had begun to reverse it. Avaline stepped out onto the porch carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. She handed one to Liam, their fingers brushing. The gesture was simple, familiar. The chasm between their worlds had closed, replaced by a bridge built of shared trauma and mutual respect. "Look at them," Avaline said softly, her gaze on her brother and Liam's daughter. The ice that had once encased her had melted, leaving behind a strength that was warmer, more human. "A few months ago I was buying a lie because I was too afraid to face the truth. And you were willing to burn your own life down just to shine a light on it." Liam watched Maya score a goal between 2 lawn chairs, her arms raised in triumph. "I wasn't trying to be a hero," he said, his voice quiet. "I was just trying to be a dad." "That's what heroes are, Liam," Avaline replied. "Just people trying to protect the ones they love." At the edge of the lawn, a man with a slight limp of his own watched the children play, a quiet, satisfied smile on his face. Graves, now retired, had refused to be anywhere else. His recovery had been slower than Kellen's, but his quiet determination had never wavered. The Langford Foundation had transformed in just 6 months from a desperate gamble into the world's leading research center for neurosynaptic disorders. Finch's research, once stripped of its fraud, contained genuine breakthroughs. In the hands of ethical scientists, it had become the foundation for a treatment protocol that was already helping dozens of patients worldwide. Liam had accepted Avaline's job offer. His office, once a janitor's closet, was now on the 49th floor, with a view nearly as impressive as the conference room where he'd once been interrogated. His insights had proved invaluable, his perspective cutting through academic complexity to find practical solutions. Eleanor came bounding up the porch steps, her copper hair flying behind her. The anxious girl from the lobby was gone, replaced by a confident child whose smile mirrored her mother's. "Dad," she called to Liam, the term still new but feeling increasingly natural. "Maya says you have more bubbles. Can we have some, please?" Liam glanced at Avaline, who nodded with a gentle smile. Their relationship had evolved gradually, naturally from allies to friends to something deeper. Eleanor had been the first to embrace the change, instantly adopting Liam as a father figure. Maya had been more cautious, but watching her mother smile again had won her over. "Coming right up," Liam said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the same small bottle he'd carried that day in the lobby. It was his talisman, his reminder of how the smallest acts could change everything. They gathered on the lawn, Maya and Eleanor, Kellen and Graves, Avaline and Liam. The adults sat on comfortable outdoor furniture while the girls stood expectantly before them. "The trick," Liam said, uncapping the bottle and dipping the wand, "is to blow gently. Not too hard, not too soft," he demonstrated, sending a stream of iridescent spheres floating upward. They caught the afternoon light, tiny rainbow worlds drifting on invisible currents. The girls squealed with delight, reaching up to catch them. "My turn," Maya insisted. Liam handed her the wand and she blew a perfect cluster that floated toward Avaline. One landed on her nose and she laughed, a free, uninhibited sound that Liam had come to treasure. As the bubbles danced around them, Liam found himself thinking of that moment in the lobby, of the desperate father who had smashed a corporate conspiracy to save his daughter. He thought of the cold, guarded CEO who had risked everything to save her brother, how far they had come, how much they had changed each other. "What are you thinking about?" Avaline asked, sliding her hand into his. "Beginnings," he replied, squeezing her fingers gently. "How you never know which moments will change everything." Later, as the sun began to set, the adults sat on the porch while the girls played a final game of tag on the lawn. Kellen, who had once been confined to a hospital bed, now moved with increasing confidence, his laughter joining the girls. "The latest test results came back today," Avaline said quietly to Liam. "The neural regeneration is exceeding all projections. Dr. Chun thinks we might be looking at a complete recovery for both of them within a year." Liam's breath caught. "Complete?" "Complete," she confirmed, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "No more tremors, no more degradation, just ... normal life." "I never dared hope for that," Liam admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "I would have settled for just stopping the progression." Avaline smiled, the warmth of it reaching her storm-gray eyes. "You taught me something, Liam Byrne. Sometimes you have to demand the impossible." Maya came running up to the porch, holding a piece of paper, a new drawing. It wasn't a castle with a gate to keep monsters out. It was a simple picture of a house with a big oak. Under the tree, 5 stick figures held hands. A man with a cane, a little girl with a bright yellow shirt, a quiet man who watched from a distance, and in the middle, a man and a woman standing close together. Above them all, a giant sun shone down, its rays touching each one of them. Quote, Liam took the drawing, his throat tight. He looked at Avaline, and in her eyes he saw the same reflection of their impossible journey. They had started in a world of glass towers and custodial closets of power and invisibility, but by walking through the fire together, they had found their way here, to this porch. On this sunny afternoon, they had found their way home. In the yard, Eleanor blew another stream of bubbles that caught the golden light of sunset, transforming them into floating jewels. One drifted back toward the porch, hovering between Liam and Avaline for a suspended moment before gently bursting. Not an ending, but a release into something new. Avaline leaned forward and kissed him, a promise sealed in the fading light. Behind them, in the house that had once been just Avaline's but was now becoming theirs, a framed photograph sat on the mantelpiece. It showed a janitor in a blue uniform kneeling in the lobby of a gleaming skyscraper, blowing bubbles for a little girl while her mother watched from a distance, her expression just beginning to thaw. The moment everything changed.